Welcome, everyone. My name is Tracy Fitzpatrick, and I'll be your moderator today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Netcom Learning, a market leader in promoting lifelong learning, training, and talent development solutions. We are very excited to host today's event, Master Generative AI, ChatGPT versus Copilot Masterclass. Presenting today's topic is Jason Kellington. Jason is a Microsoft certified trainer. He is a seasoned learning consultant and technical writer, boasting over 2 decades of experience in the realm of IT. Jason has honed his skills in the development and delivery of solutions geared towards enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of enterprise IT. His contributions extend across various channels, be it through dynamic classroom training, personalized training materials, or hands-on site consulting. Now, please bear in mind that this is an overview of a very robust topic. We offer a collection of technical and business courses that can be tailored to your specific requirements. If you are interested in a further discussion, you can make an appointment with our learning consultants through our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session is also being recorded, so you'll get free access to the recording in the next 24 hours via email. Netcom Learning helps customers build innovative learning organizations by achieving a smarter workforce, adapting to change, and driving growth. We do this with a broad catalog of offerings, developing customized learning plans, and our global delivery capabilities. Since 1998, we have been empowering organizations with our managed learning services to help them reach optimal performance results and address challenges. We do have 9 practice areas in which we specialize. They encompass people, process, and technology training. Today's presentation is from the Business Application Practice Area. Netcom Learning offers a comprehensive training portfolio of courses for the topic being covered today. Our upcoming classes include various trainings on the given courses. You can also access a variety of marketing assets, such as the free training and blogs, by clicking on the available event handout. These offerings can be found with a simple search on our website at netcomlearning.com. Today's session will cover the comparison between the 2 powerful Gen AI tools and how they can be used to elevate your AI projects. This masterclass has been designed to understand the nuances and capabilities of ChatGPT and Copilot required by professionals in various fields. In addition, participants will get guidance on effectively preparing for the MS 4006 certification course and exam during today's session. And now I would like to give you a quick overview of the logistics before we get started. To begin with, you do have the option to view in full screen by clicking on the full screen button on the right side of the GoToWebinar viewer. Simply hit the escape key to exit the full screen. Everyone has been muted except for our presenters. Feel free to submit any questions you have for the presenters here in the questions pane, and we will address them at the end of the session. And to get the best out of today's events, we've included the slides, courses we talk about, and marketing assets in the handout section of your GoToWebinar viewer. You may refer to them at any time to get a better understanding of today's topic. And we do realize that some of you may have to leave early and want to let you know that as you do leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to take a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience and improve our future sessions for you. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. And now I'd like to pass this over to our trainer to present today's topic. Hey, Jason, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Tracy, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Kellington. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I've been spending a lot of time working with generative AI in the last little while. I have roughly 25 plus years in IT, the last 15 or so, working in digital transformation and adoption. And there is no bigger topic in the industry right now than generative AI and the use of generative AI in the enterprise. So with that, let's jump into today's masterclass. Our agenda for the next couple of hours or so will be just like you see on this slide. We'll jump into a little bit of an introduction to generative AI because there's a couple things to understand here. Number one, what is a generative AI and AI in general? But then also, why is there such a big buzz around generative AI right now? It seems to have, in the last couple of years, exploded onto the scene without, any kind of previous buzz about it at all. So we'll talk about that a little bit in point number one in our first section. In agenda item number two, we're going to take a look at kind of the two key generative AI players out there right now, ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. We'll look at the two products. We'll do a comparison between the two, understand where they are similar, where they are different, and give you a good overview of what those two products provide. And then we'll jump into some of the use cases and using generative AI within the enterprise perspective, using generative AI to improve your business, create productivity, make life easier for you, your employees, all of those different things that generative AI can provide in real world business scenarios. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll jump in and get hands-on and look at both ChatGPT and Copilot within their native interfaces, really as generative AI engines and tools. We'll do a little bit of comparison between the two from the hands-on perspective, see how they work, what they do, what some of the practical differences are between the two. And then we'll take a deeper dive, and this will be a good chunk of our time today, a deeper dive into Copilot within Microsoft 365 and the integration capabilities that Copilot provides in the Microsoft 365 suite, and how from an enterprise perspective, there is a pretty immense opportunity to start leveraging generative AI within your enterprise tenant, especially obviously within the Microsoft 365 tenant. We'll take a pretty deep dive and a really good look into those integration capabilities. We'll wrap up our ordered agenda with data privacy and safety and just talking about user and organizational protection and some of the things that are in place and assurances and standards that are set for data privacy and safety in these two tools and for generative AI in general. And then we'll wrap up with a brief Q&A session. We'll take questions from the group and hopefully get a good, concise answer to those questions when they come up. So really excited to jump into this and get going and hopefully, give you that grounded, great basis for generative AI knowledge that will help you and your organization take generative AI and make it more useful and productive for your business. Let's jump in. So, introduction to generative AI. Understanding the landscape, there's a couple things that we need to understand and get set straight away here. Number one, AI in general, artificial intelligence. I feel like you hardly ever see it in the non-acronym form anymore. But when we talk about artificial intelligence in general, as a general term, and this is a term that was coined in the 50s and really references generally the ability of computers and machines to simulate human intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. And that's the big piece. I think it's not surprising to see artificial intelligence defined with a term like simulate human intelligence. Of course, when this term was coined in the 1950s, it was very imaginative, very non-concrete, very sci-fi. Fast forward to 2024, and the, you know, current state, this is a very specific reality. Artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence across different spectrums of IT and business it's everywhere. It's almost impossible to look and find any aspect of IT or business that is not touched in some way by artificial intelligence. And the primary reason for that is the growth of generative AI. And generative AI is a specific branch or technology subset of artificial intelligence that involves using large language models, which consume and access massive amounts of data with the idea to simulate that human thought process and response. And the idea with large language models, or LLMs for short, if you will, is to consume as much information as possible and to examine that information in light of, human language and human response and human understanding, to anticipate or provide a relatively good percentage chance that it can respond with a word and, multiple words building up a phrase to simulate a human response. And with LLMs, we get that ability to examine and comprehend and, most importantly, create content without the need for human intervention. And that's the big piece of generative AI, where, sure, examining and comprehending and, doing things like anticipating forecasted sales for an organization. AI has been used to do that for quite a while. But with generative AI, we now have the ability to create content, to generate content. So documents, images, really, when we get into Microsoft 365 and Copilot, you'll see, charts and graphs and PowerPoint decks and all of these different pieces of content that prior to generative AI, they were a manual, labor-intensive human task. Generative AI takes that, that human approach, puts the technology in place of the person for some of these tasks, and does the generation for us. Typically, generative AI interfaces interact through conversation, and our conversational chat-based interfaces. So you're going to see that with both ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot, that they are very conversational engines. And in fact, if we want to capture the value from these tools, conversation, back and forth, iteration is the best way to do it. And the primary reason for that is because generative AI is not just about spitting out one piece of content in response to a single request. It's about learning and adapting as those questions are asked, as content is generated and reformed and iterated through. Generative AI can learn and adapt based on that user input and context. So it becomes very much like an ongoing conversation with a person, where the questions you're asking and the feedback you're providing is being considered and taken in by that person that you're talking to and reflected in their answers back to you. So if we look at using generative AI in practical terms, and we will look at this in specific, very practical screen shared terms in ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. But if we think about it from a use case perspective, our primary components, our ingredients for, our AI recipe, if you will, involve inputs, the instructions that we provide to a generative AI interface, and then the outputs that the AI technology produces. What happens in the middle This is generative AI. And our slide here has the Copilot logo and some of the Microsoft 365 apps included, which is certainly one of the potential ways to do this. ChatGPT is another. There are other, large language models that are out there. We're focusing on ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot today because they are, predominantly the big players in the space, and where most people's attention is being drawn. But the idea of that engine taking your input in, interpreting the instructions, and then producing an output based on your instructions is the primary process flow or workflow with an AI, generative AI engine. So, whether that's something like an introductory paragraph for your company's next quarterly report, whether that's a presentation created from different documents that you have in place, whether that's a summary of key topics discussed in several meetings, there's a number of different ways that generative AI will provide those outputs. And we can think about, text. That's, kind of the primary and core way that generative AI will output information. But as we'll see, as we get into some of the practical demonstrations, it's not just text. It's images, it's PowerPoint presentations, it's charts and graphs, it's formulas and code. It's a wide variety of outputs that we can start asking generative AI to create for us and save ourselves the time and the manual output or the manual churn that it takes to create that content. And we'll see as we go along that this is pretty radically transformative for most businesses. But I want to rewind a little bit. We wanted to get our ground set talking about AI and generative AI and what generative AI looks like in general. But let's talk about why we're talking about generative AI and why it has seemingly, exploded onto the scene and really taken over the IT narrative or the business narrative in almost every sector of the industry. And there's a few changes that have happened in the last couple years. And a lot of this has been spurred originally by no one loves to talk about it now, but by COVID, and by the idea that all of a sudden everyone was forced to change the way that they worked and to change the way that they operated their businesses. And the way that companies communicated, the way that employees did work, all changed rapidly. And data and online collaboration became a huge part of what every company does. And that meant, transformation across almost all industries, and the idea that these industries now needed their resources available digitally. They needed digital and collaborative ways for their employees to get work done. And, really, I think most industry experts would agree that, that year and a half of COVID really accelerated digital transformation in organizations, and that idea that, hey, we need to change the way we do things, we probably packed about 10 to 15 years of natural change into an 18-month period. And so there was this rapid transformation of the way that organizations did business, and the way that companies grow and build their business and their brand and interact with their customers has changed. And we have this huge influx of information and data across almost every industry. And coupled with those changes, this huge influx of data and technology changes and needs, along comes a breakthrough in generative AI capability. And it really came from OpenAI, was the company that is responsible for ChatGPT 4, which is the current version that we're going to use in ChatGPT. But their engines, their generative AI engines, finally kind of cracked the ability to create human-like levels of both performance and accuracy with interactive chat-based model. And this idea of being able to provide input text, ask the engine to do something, and have that engine generate the output as text, and then loop this, right, essentially, and kind of continue to improve the output and ask for something like, can you give me a summary of the newest rules and regulations in oil and gas industry? And the engine would give you an output, and it might be, oh, that's not quite specific enough, so I'm going to ask it again, can you make that more specific? And we'll see this practically, but this idea of the chat-based conversation and the similarity of talking to a generative AI chatbot versus talking to like a human intern have gotten so close that generative AI has now, kind of bridged the gap between what would have been nice to have and what is actually achievable. And this in itself might not have been such a critical catalyst if it weren't for the fact that many organizations are just experiencing massive digital debt. And I'll talk a little bit about digital debt here because this doesn't directly affect, ChatGPT or Copilot from a functional perspective, but this is a huge catalyst and where these engines are providing huge benefits to organizations. There's a few stats on the slide here, and this is from the Microsoft Work Trend, one of the Microsoft Work Trend Index reports talking about AI in the workplace. And they did a study of, globally across multiple organizations and industries of, employee feedback on different pieces. And there were a few, standout pieces of information from this index. I'm going to talk about some of them on this slide and some of them on the next. But the idea that, employees, people generally in their jobs feel buried beneath this growing mountain of data and information that is being fed into them. And frankly, the majority just don't feel like they have enough time or energy to do their job properly in light of all of that information and all of those changes that are happening. And again, the majority of 57% saying, communication and going back and forth, meetings, chats, those types of things are the bulk of what they do in a day. Apart from their, actual creative and contributive work. And so if you think of someone like a graphic artist, for example, or a copyright author, or you could put this onto almost any job, a program manager, the different things that they do. This is the split, right? 57 and 43 between communicating and actually, kind of creating or producing the outputs that are indicative of what their job is responsible for. That's not a great it's not a great split, and I think many organizations and many employees would say that this communication time is specifically, too large. And that's where a lot of that time and energy gets sucked into. And then the creation piece is too small a percentage for adequate creation. And then the tools that are in place are very, manual and onerous. And some of the creation, so the bulk of that 43% of time creating is in realistically in not even creative tasks. It's in, putting a template together and, on a PowerPoint slide deck, creating the multiple slides that are in place or those types of things. And so this situation of digital debt for many organizations, um, companies are desperate for a way to get out of this and a way to give their employees tools to streamline and climb out from underneath this mountain of digital debt that they're sitting underneath. Um, and when the modern work index or modern work trend index looked at investing in AI driven solutions, the responses were pretty overwhelming. And I think lots of times that idea of, hey, are we going to be, is AI going to take my job, right? That's a very common, kind of scary perspective from many employees. And the majority of the work trend index found that that wasn't the case for the majority, the slim majority of employees. And the understanding of the benefits that AI provides really showed up in the fact that for 70% of employees, they see opportunity to save time and effort, to be able to focus on the things that they can actually provide value in, and delegate the tedious and the manual and the repetitive stuff to AI capabilities to lessen their workload, to remove that digital debt, and to allow them to invest in the creative and valuable places that they can contribute to their organizations. And from a leadership and management perspective, the numbers speak for themselves. 82% recognize the need to prepare for AI and build those skills around AI capability across a number of different areas, from analytical judgment to emotional intelligence to intellectual curiosity. These are all key pieces in driving generative AI usage in an organization and making the best use of that. So in this kind of current frame, with this massive amount of data and technology change happening, and the ability now of generative AI to technically assist with that, that's where we sit. That's where our current landscape is. And many organizations are looking to generative AI tools and technology to help them dig out from underneath that mountain of digital debt. And the two, like I said, main players really in the enterprise space are ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. If we think of generative AI engines, those are the two that are really causing the biggest stir, I think being most widely adopted at across enterprise organizations. You see these in the news and being talked about the most. So that's where we're going to focus. We're going to take a look at these two tools, what they provide, how they compare to each other, and what the use cases are for these tools in the enterprise, and how they can be leveraged for great capability, and how you, as individual users curious about generative AI and wanting to get a good basis, how to best understand them and how to best use them. So we'll take a look here in this section at ChatGPT versus Copilot. This is not a competition. This is not a face-off where one of them emerges victorious. This is a comparative analysis of these two tools, what they are, and where they are best used. So we'll talk about ChatGPT first. And ChatGPT really is kind of, widely considered as the catalyst for the whole generative AI boom. And the Open AI organization, the creators of ChatGPT, are widely recognized as the folks that initiated this generative AI explosion. And ChatGPT itself is a large language model and uses natural language processing tech that combines machine learning, deep learning, and natural language understanding to answer questions and respond to conversations in a human-like way. So those algorithms that it uses and kind of the GPT-4 engine, if you will, right now. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Generative pre-trained transformer is what ChatGPT stands for. We'll see that in text just a little bit later. But using those machine learning algorithms, and sorry, I just got to get my pen back here. There we go. Using those machine learning algorithms to understand the incoming prompts and context and inputs, and generate appropriate responses. And the core functionality here that's happening behind the scenes in GPT is really its ability to predict the next word in a given sequence based on patterns that it's seen from human language. And this, pattern that's learned from human language, this is a massive amount of training data that is used to show ChatGPT what human interaction looks like, what human conversation looks like. And it's really just this inundation of examples of the ChatGPT engine, to the point where it takes, and again, the ability of a large language model to consume and understand information is almost infinitely. I won't say infinitely because technically not possible, but certainly exponentially better than what the human brain can do. And that's where a lot of the strengths in generative AI come from, is the ability to, consume massive amounts of information far faster than any human brain could. And not only consume it, but contextualize it, take it in, understand it, and be able to respond with human-like intelligence about those different subject matters. That's where the strength of generative AI engines come in, and that's where ChatGPT really, kind of hit the ground running and did some pretty amazing things that just really weren't even imagined before. And some of those things in the just general chat GPT use, composing text in general, right? The idea of essays, emails, cover letters. I think for general communication and general information, chat GPT outputs are probably close to the majority of the general blobs of text that are floating around there in the in the email and document world. There's a lot of chat GPT produced content out there, and it's because it makes it easy. It consumes information from all of those sources and has a much broader and more detailed context for any topic than we could potentially generate with our own human brain. And so things like creating lists, describing art in detail, writing code. This is a very strong part of ChatGPT and then generative AI engines in general. Something that is very succinct and specific and has a consistent rule set, like code, right? So like Python code or JavaScript code or whatever the case might be. LLM models like ChatGPT are amazing at creating that code, or in understanding that code and potentially, helping you to identify where there are issues with that code. Summarizing content. So like I said, taking large amounts of data and compressing it, or summarizing it in a much shorter chunk of text, and not just, pulling out the last sentence of each paragraph, but in consuming it with that simulated human intelligence and providing a summary that may not contain a lot of the original words in the document, but that still succinctly summarizes the intent, the topic, and the meaning of the original document. Building resumes, searching the internet to a certain extent. ChatGPT technically has an end point, right? Right now, I think it's usually about a year behind as far as the general knowledge of the internet goes. That's the data that it's been trained on. So it's not necessarily a core internet search like a Google or a Bing or any of the internet search engines, but it provides a much broader context and much more intelligence in understanding all of that information out there. So it's a give and take. And I want to take a look here into ChatGPT, and just so we see and understand what is this specifically. I want to bring this down on the screen here, and we will just use the free version of ChatGPT. This is at chat.openai.com. You'll see here that it's based on the ChatGPT 3.5 engine, so that's the second from newest model. I have the ability to, if I want to choose the GPT-4, I can, but it's going to cost me. And we'll talk about licensing in just a little bit. But general interactions with a model like ChatGPT are fairly straightforward. And we have example prompts here. And anytime we are providing an input to a generative AI engine like ChatGPT, we typically call that a prompt. And so there's some example prompts here, and we can use those. This brainstorm incentives. This has generated kind of what is essentially a fictional prompt and said, hey, give me 7 ideas for a customer loyalty program. I work at a small bookstore. So we're providing some context for the engine. We're letting it know what we want for output, what that output should be, 7 ideas for a customer loyalty program. And ChatGPT, again, based on its knowledge and the data that it has in place, and this is certainly ChatGPT would contain a whole bunch of information about different loyalty programs that have been used over the years in different organizations. So the context and the imagination, if you will, of ChatGPT has a bigger grounding data-wise in what it knows than any human brain could ever have. So that's a huge benefit. So it can provide that, a very objective look at what 7 ideas for customer loyalty might look like. And these, not all of the time are you going to, and I would say seldom actually, are you going to just take this list and use it, but it's a beginning point, right? It's a catalyst. It's a starting point where I don't have to. I didn't think up these ideas and sit there and spin for 60 minutes to try to come up with these ideas and then spend time refining them. ChatGPT did that core, imagination work for me, or at least provided an inspiration for my imagination, and then I can take this list from here and refine it. And maybe the online reviews incentive, maybe that's not something I'm interested in, or maybe birthday discounts, we want to leave that out. We can remove these. Seeing something like a frequent buyer card might spur an idea for something else, right? And say, oh, rather than a frequent buyer card, what about some specific book lover loyalty program that I could put in place. So it's about generating ideas, and it gets, this is a pretty simple prompt and a pretty simple example, but this isn't where it ends with generative AI, because I have an ongoing conversation in place. So I could say, let's focus more on encouraging large volume purchases. So I'm taking the input that ChatGPT has given me and I'm asking it to refine it. I want my customers to buy more books. So what might the ideas be look like if it was more geared towards large volume purchases? And so here are 7 new ideas that are somewhat the same, right? Still looking at kind of loyalty program and representing my customers in their book buying experience, but more targeted. And that conversation, and we can go with this conversation for as long as I want. I might want to say provide a detailed rollout plan for each idea. And I'll type properly here. And so I'm refining. I'm continuing the conversation, and I can generate very practical steps to take for each of these particular loyalty program ideas. And so it has it's built in phases for me, and the phases aren't just cookie cutter phases that it kind of populates dummy text for each one. These are phases that are targeted to the idea itself. So it's looking at, for the ones that are coming up here, I'll use volume purchase contests. Obviously it knows it's a contest. So how do we structure the contest? How do we promote it? What do the prizes look like? How are we going to launch it? And same thing for the discounts. Who's our audience? How do we do outreach? What do the pricing agreements look like? So the ability to really create, and I think with this simple example you see the creative capability in the business sense. Now there are other examples that can really showcase creative capability, maybe not from a core business standpoint, but to think about the breadth and depth of ChatGPT capability. And something like, okay, this is a completely random example, but something as kind of, maybe no one would have thought of doing this before, but because ChatGPT is here, we can do this. Create a script for a Star Trek episode. In the style of T.S. Eliot. So we're combining 2 things that are completely random, really not related. But this will generate a complete script. And you'll notice, for those of you that may be Star Trek inclined, you'll notice that this is Star Trek: The Next Generation. We've got Picard and Data in there. And so it's generated here a scene, a simple scene. And I might see, okay, the scene is interesting, but generate a script for an entire 30-minute episode. Episode. And again, the conversational capability, right? And the idea of, stretching this out and getting it to provide exactly the content I want. And this is going to generate for a while because it's doing a 30-minute episode, and we have different acts, and we have the stage directions and the dialogue and everything else, but all in as I asked, in the style of poet T.S. Eliot. And so it's very poetic. All of the word is very prose like, and so we get a very interesting result here. Again, is this business applicable? No, but you can see how different creative elements can be combined and created in a way that this is creatively very interesting. Right? I think in the very first one, Picard's soliloquy here, kind of building in that classic Star Trek theme, yet some of the phrasing and rhyming meters of T.S. Eliot. It's kind of cool. And I won't spend too much time on the personal and creative things, but I think to understand the creative capability, you need to see it happening in different ways and in different areas. And I know that this isn't necessarily an industry, but in different use cases. So that is ChatGPT 3.5, and that's the free version. And we'll talk about versioning and look at the comparison a little bit later. But it's primarily that conversational interface that we can input text in and get text out. There are other inputs and outputs that we'll look at a little bit later, but this is the core functionality of ChatGPT. Now, the other side of our the other side of our comparison is Microsoft Copilot. Now, Microsoft is a partner with OpenAI, and Microsoft Copilot is a result of that partnership. Copilot it provides some of the same conversational capabilities as ChatGPT, but adds some extra functionality. And the best definition I think of Microsoft Copilot, and this is from Microsoft, but it's an AI powered digital assistant. So it has generative AI capabilities at its core, but also adds in some digital assistance and application integration capabilities into the Microsoft 365 suite that take that generative AI capability directly into the enterprise space. Copilot uses the same large language models as ChatGPT, and then takes that large language model capability and that ability to consume and understand the context of information, and not just apply it to the general kind of internet slash publicly available knowledge, but take and apply that to your enterprise data. Okay, so in the Microsoft Graph, and we won't make this a huge kind of Microsoft 365 course, but Microsoft Graph is where all of the internal data for Microsoft 365 is stored. So think about emails and calendar events and meeting stuff, all of your documents in SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive. That's all contained within the Microsoft Graph. What Copilot does is it takes that large language model capability and applies it to enterprise data. So when we ask questions of Copilot, we have the opportunity to not only ask, questions about the world at large, about generally available information, but we can ask questions about our business and our industry specifically based on the data that we have in our internal kind of Microsoft 365 tenant. In addition to that, Copilot integrates with Microsoft 365 applications to take generative AI and plug it into a lot of the Microsoft 365 apps and processes and those types of things that we are familiar with and that we've been using for the last few years, and that have really, kind of again exploded onto the scene with the need for digital transformation and remote and hybrid work. So it's taking that generative AI capability and it's infusing it into the Microsoft 365 suite. The core interface for Copilot doesn't look radically different from ChatGPT. So this is the kind of consumer version of Copilot, the free version of Copilot, if you will. I'm logged in with my personal Microsoft 365 account, and I'm at copilot.microsoft.com, and I can do much of the same things as ChatGPT. And there are a few, kind of controls, and here are some of the, the prompts that it has in mind, and the same things, that I was doing with ChatGPT. It's a little more graphically intense and in your face, but the creative capability is still there. So invent a completely impractical gadget and write a tagline for it. This is something that is silly and imaginative, but you have that almost infinite kind of creative and content creation ability within Copilot. And we could ask this to do, a lot of the same things, create 7 ideas for a customer loyalty program. I'm going to spell it properly. I work at a bookstore. So very similar prompt to what we fed ChatGPT. We get kind of the same output. It's not going to be exactly the same. The one thing about large language models is, it's not just a pat answer. We can ask the same question twice and get different answers because there's an amount of creative capability built into these engines, really with kind of variables for creativity. And so we see, some of those outputs, and you'll notice that Copilot really likes emojis. So it's put it in here, and we have some of those opportunities, some of those ideas that were very similar to ChatGPT, and the conversational engine is the same thing. Create a marketing plan for each idea, right? Rather than a kind of an implementation, I'll talk about marketing. So it'll, spit out some marketing ideas for the different ideas, and even giving them names and different things that we might not really think about or consider, or we might sit there and churn for 20-25 minutes to try to come up with a good name. And maybe we wouldn't use these names exactly, but again, it's a great catalyst to begin inspiration and to start that thought process. So that conversational interface with Copilot in the free version, very similar to ChatGPT. Now, what Copilot has in its free version that ChatGPT doesn't, are some extra creative capabilities. Something like this: create an image. Okay, so the free version of ChatGPT doesn't create images. The free version of Copilot does, to a certain extent. You have a limited number of image requests that you can make over a certain amount of time, and it gets slower the more you request. But I could say create an image that shows the landscape of, I'll use my kind of native area here of northern Saskatchewan, Canada. And so it will generate, this is using the DALL-E engine, and you can see right here it says powered by DALL-E. When we go back to the paid version of Copilot in a little bit, we're going to show you DALL-E. Same thing. Okay, so, and you can see we have our little credits, and 13 of these to burn. And so it shows 3 or 4 images here that, kind of as best as it can represents that landscape. Now, unfortunately, we have 0 mountains in Saskatchewan, so it's missed the mark on here. And I might say, and I can be as kind of concise or as wordy as I want here, and I might just say without mountains. So even when the image generation, we have that conversational capability and that ability to, recreate based on what has just been created in that iteration. And so it will create here and hopefully show less mountains in these images. I would guess that probably at least one has mountains, because that's just sometimes the way. Look at that. I think all, 3, and maybe even the one that didn't have mountains has more mountains. This is to illustrate that ChatGPT, Copilot, generative AI engines are fallible. They will not get the perfect result for you every time. And they also have the potential to get that result completely wrong. Because of that creative and imaginative capability that's built into the engine, we may have within generative AI engines, we may get results that are termed as hallucinations. And that is basically a result that is not grounded in factual information, a piece of data that GPT or that the engine has essentially created out of thin air. And one of the strengths of LLMs is creating, kind of that seemingly creating content out of thin air. But one of the drawbacks is that we could potentially get false information or false data. So that's something to be aware of. And in something like Copilot, if we think of something like this, provide, and I'm going to show you something here. Actually, this is extremely useful. This is a conversation, right? So each prompt that I provide, Copilot as well as ChatGPT will assume that I want to continue the conversation here. If I want to start over again, I can click New Topic. And in ChatGPT, it's start a new conversation, and it starts from scratch. So it erases all of that context that we have in place before and allows me to start from scratch. So I might say here, provide a brief, and I'm going to go more creative here. Okay, so we have a conversation style that it's just a toggle button here that I can choose. This is essentially saying, hey, worry a little more about creativity and a little less about getting everything concretely correct. Now, if I say provide a brief history of let's say artificial intelligence in computing over the past 100 years. So I've asked it to be a little bit more creative here, and it's going to provide me a result. And again, with a large language model, I don't know exactly what text I'm going to get out of here because it changes based on what kind of where the random seeds end up for the engine's creativity capability. So we see those results, and here's it's providing a little bit of a timeline. And the cool thing about Copilot is in its results, it will provide you with references and cite its sources, which is extremely helpful for fact checking those sources and for checking for hallucinations. So we have, you'll notice for every single point, there is a source. Wikipedia for a bunch of them. And you'll see that there are other sources quoted here, mostly Wikipedia articles, but some other ones as well. So all of those articles are cited as sources, and we can follow up on those. A really cool capability of generative AI is not only to generate content, but to take a look at content. So I can take this output. I'm going to copy this output, this little summary of the last 100 years of AI, and I'm going to create a new topic. And I'm just going to flip it to more precise for fun. I don't necessarily need to do that. And I'm going to say fact check an article for me. And it's going to ask me for that article. Wow, and it's speaking back very slowly. Maybe it thinks it needs to go slow so that I can understand. That's maybe the slowest I've ever seen that kind of respond before. That's interesting. Okay, so it is almost done its output. And it's saying, hey, I'd love to fact check that for you, provide the text, right? So then I can paste in the text of my article. I'm going to get rid of the source information at the bottom here. And I'm going to provide that right there. So again, this is output that Copilot gave me, and you get the same results from ChatGPT or similar results from ChatGPT. So you could do this in ChatGPT as well. But I'm saying, hey, Copilot, fact check the information that you just gave me. And the cool thing about Copilot is, it is diverse and broad enough, and I've started a new conversation that it has no recollection of the information that it just gave me. It's starting net new. It doesn't know that this was information produced by Copilot. And so it's fact checking that information, looking at that based on the information that it has, and providing me with a response. The response is stopped here, and I'm not radically surprised based on the speed of that last output. So what I think I'm going to do here is just copy this, and I'm going to flip over to Just the pro version, so we can see what this looks like, kind of a licensed version. So let's go like this. And we'll do this same way. So this is the paid version of Copilot in Microsoft 365. We're going to come back and look at this in more detail a little bit, but I just want to look at this, for common use cases in large language models and the different imaginative ways that we can use them. Fact check an article for me. And then I'll provide the article and get those fact check results. And so it'll say, and it'll look at sources. And again, I didn't, quote any sources here that I had from the original output, but it's going to go through and look at those, those particular bullet points and the information that's quoted. It's fairly general, right? It's not naming any names. It's not providing any specific dates. So fact checking is going to be pretty general. And here it actually, jumps in a little more detail and talks about the Dartmouth conference. It talks about Cloud Shannon. It talks about Turing. It talks about some of the more specific details, and then gives me, take a look at these authoritative resources. And here are a number of different pieces of information that could potentially help you out. And what it's done here is actually looked at some documents that I have in Microsoft 365 to provide that information. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the idea of really using generative AI as a pseudo-human helper, thinking of it as a personality, as someone that you can interact with and refine ideas through, is a huge viewpoint, a hugely important viewpoint, and getting the most out of generative AI. Okay, so we've seen both of these tools in a little bit of practical context. Let's zoom out a little bit and talk about these two tools compared to each other and where the differences lie. So ChatGPT on the left, Copilot on the right. A lot of this, there are a lot of similarities. So, origin-wise, ChatGPT was developed by OpenAI, and as I said earlier, one of those kind of key large language models that was put into place in the genesis of generative AI. Microsoft Copilot, developed by Microsoft, right? The product itself is developed by Microsoft, but as we see a little bit later down in technology here, it's actually based on, oh shoot, I don't have it in the chart. Okay, well, I'll write it in. That's my bad. I apologize. Based on GPT. Okay, so the same model that ChatGPT uses, the generative pre-trained transformer, Microsoft Copilot is based on that same engine. And we'll take a look at that in just a second when we're doing some more practical demos. Primary use case, again, we saw how ChatGPT is very conversational, good for answering questions in text. Copilot can do that as well, but as we'll see in some of the demonstrations, it also provides some really great integration with and plugins into Microsoft 365 apps. Accessibility, and this isn't from a special needs type perspective, but more from how do I access this tool? ChatGPT generally available in the browser, or we can connect to it via the ChatGPT API for integration and customization. Copilot available in the browser as well, just like we saw in our examples. and also directly integrated into the Microsoft 365 suite, as we will see in some of the Copilot specific demos later on. Capabilities really run, as far as this ability to compose essays, emails, cover letters, the actual generation of text, they're very similar in that way. But Microsoft Copilot adds that capability to assist with productivity tasks and leveraging user data, which is a really big one. And we saw echoes of that or shadows of that in my last demo for more personalized assistance. Integration wise, ChatGPT can be integrated into a bunch of applications via the API, which is more, it's a more intensive developer centric process. Whereas Copilot does have that capability built into a large set of the Microsoft 365 apps, a lot of which we'll see in practical demonstration like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, and Teams. Customization, kind of really related to the integration piece. Probably less customizable from the Copilot perspective than ChatGPT is. But the idea behind both of these is really that LLM is the core functionality. That large language model is the core functionality, and if we can supplement that with maybe a slightly different interface or a slightly different set of data, that's the bulk of the customization. The bulk of the customization that we're going to see within these different products. This last slide just adds one piece on here. I want to show this just because of right at the bottom here. So the top is very much the same with this licensing slide. So we saw the free version of GPT-4. We also saw the free version of Copilot. And now that free version doesn't have the Microsoft 365 integration. It's just a browser-based chat interface. Both of these products have a paid version. So ChatGPT Pro is available for a USD $20 monthly fee. So it's based on the most recent generative pre-trained transformer engine, and then also includes image generation. The paid version of Copilot is $30 monthly, alongside, and it has included with a supported Microsoft 365 subscription. We're going to kind of from this point forward, in looking at some of the features and use cases and kind of practical examples, I'm going to focus on the paid versions because they provide the most comprehensive set of features and capabilities, and we really want to showcase what's happening, what's capable with these different tools. So in that, let's take a look at some use cases and applications and what it looks like to use these products in the real world. And this section here I've included a few slides that talk about how you can use both of these engines in practical ways and some of the different things to think about when we are building and working with generative AI. And you've seen this in some of my examples, and the idea of being, clear and specific with what you want is important. And technically, okay, I shouldn't say clear and specific because those are two different things. But be clear, and what you want for output is in first, one of the first building blocks to say. So if I write something about Gen AI for writers, my engine isn't going to have any context. That's leaving what it actually outputs up to the engine. So it might be a sentence, it might be a paragraph, it could be, a 20-page document, could be a limerick for all I know. So being clear about what you want is really important. So we'll see in some of the left-hand sections where, we have a paragraph, and we could be more specific and say, write a 200 word paragraph, or write a paragraph in the style of, this, or write a paragraph in the active with an active verb tense about why generative AI is useful for writers. So being as clear as possible about what we want is important. And again, summarize this, summarize what, and summarize it how. Right? Summarize this article in 3 sentences. Providing some of that clarity is important. And some of these examples are maybe just could be a little bit more concrete, but I've made them very clear and obvious here, just for simplicity's sake. Find some data about AI. Well, that could be anything, right? But if we're a little more specific, find a statistic. Which is that much better than AI or than data? Probably not. But that might be find a instead of just saying statistic, maybe we say find a publishing industry statistic about the growth of AI in the workplace, right? And providing that clarity around what exactly we want. That's important. And these are all generative examples. Here's a more kind of corrective or assessive example, saying, how can I improve this? What are you improving? How do you want to improve it? Versus saying, how can I make this sentence more engaging? Then the engine knows what it's looking at, a sentence, knows what it needs to do with that sentence, make it more engaging. And again, clarity is good. And I think this is probably just as good a time any to take a quick 5-minute break. So let's do that. Take a little bit of a break. We'll come back and finish up talking about how we can get the most out of generative AI in the practical sense.
Thank you so much, Jason. Hello, everyone. I am Sagnik. I'm the product marketing manager at Netcom Learning. And I would like to borrow a few minutes before we head over to the break. Now, I'd like to just take a few moments to take everyone through the badge redemption process. As you know that we are excited to announce that all the participants in today's masterclass have been given exclusive free access to MS 4006 Copilot for Microsoft 365 Administrators courseware. And it also comes with your digital achievement trophies and badges issued by Microsoft. So these badges are available to you on Microsoft Learn to celebrate your skilling journey. And this can really help you highlight your newly acquired skills and boost your career potential across your social media platforms like LinkedIn. So we will quickly go through this process. I request everyone to follow along. It would barely take 2 to 3 minutes for us to complete. So just I'll request everyone to come on this link. The link is available on your GoToWebinar chat window right now. It has been posted. So please use that link. This would be the page that you'd be seeing and follow along with me. So on this page, you have multiple ways to get started. But one of the requirements for you to complete this redemption is you having an account on Microsoft Learn. If you already have an account, it's great. You can directly start with the process. If not, we will be also guiding you on how you can go about with that as well. So if you have your Microsoft Learn account, you can straight away click on this link, redeem your MS 4006 courseware and badges, and you'd be straight away redirected to Microsoft Learn. It would, if you're already logged in, it's going to be directly taking you to the redemption part. If not, we also have very visually laid out steps here. So please follow along. So the step 1 is for you to sign into your Microsoft Learn account in case you are not already signed in. And in case you don't have an account, on the screen, you can see you'll be getting this sign in dialog, and below the sign in option, you'd get having no account, create one. So there's going to be the create one option is hyperlinked. So once you click on that, you would be redirected to the Microsoft's account creation process. Again, it takes 2 to 3 minutes. It's very simple and easy. All you need to do is quickly create an account. If you already have a Microsoft account but not on Learn, you can also use that to instantly create and sign in to Microsoft Learn using that. So you have your personal or professional Outlook or Hotmail account, for example, use those credentials to proceed with the signing in and this step. Now, once you're signed in, you'd be seeing this prompt on your screen. So if you're already signed in, or you have an account and you're just signing in, or you don't have an account, you just created as part of this process, all of these ways you're going to be ultimately seeing this dialog on your screen, which will be asking you to redeem your code. Now, the code that is required is already pre-populated, so you don't have to enter any code manually. It's important to follow that. Make sure you don't type in any codes manually, you don't change the codes. If you need to redo the steps, just come back to this page and click on the Get Started link here, or the Redeem Your MS4006 courseware and badges link on the top. Now, once you do that, the code is going to auto-populate on this dialog, and all you need to do is click on the Redeem button. Now, once you click on redeem, it's going to take a few seconds, and then you're going to see this prompt that we have successfully added your achievements to your profile. Now, once you click on view profile, you can see all the different badges and the modules available on your learning dashboard on Microsoft Learn. You can quickly switch over to the access the courseware through the training tab, which is available on the left hand panel of your Microsoft Learn dashboard. So we really recommend you complete this process right now before within the break time, so you are on the right page. These are brand new coursewares around Copilot, and we hope you really get the most benefit out of it. With that, one last thing, make sure to also share your achievements and celebrate it. By sharing your digital trophies on Microsoft on your LinkedIn profiles. And don't forget to tag Netcom Learning and Microsoft on your posts for maximum visibility and reach. So with that, let's proceed to the break. Make sure to complete this redemption. Thank you, everyone.
Sure, we are now going to take a 5-minute break, but before we do that, we are going to launch a quick poll that we want to invite you to participate in. Doing so helps us know how we can better serve you by telling us who might be interested in more information or in taking some additional training. In addition, we have a lot more informative webinars coming up, so please go to netcomlearning.com/webinars in order to register.
All right, back from break. Let's talk a little bit more about getting the most out of generative AI. Be specific, and this is similar to being clear, but the idea that we're providing specific ideas or metrics or subjects or topics that we want to talk about. And again, very, very, kind of general ideas here, and making sure that something like create a paragraph about generative AI, making sure we're making that a little more informative and saying, okay, we want the benefits of generative AI. We want that for educators, and we want it relative to, differentiated instruction, a specific focus of educators. So being as specific as possible. And one of the biggest things with these different kind of getting the most out of generative AI slides is the idea of Copilot and ChatGPT have as broad a context as you could possibly imagine. They have so much information available at their fingertips that they have, it's global context. Whatever topic you talk about, they will have gigabytes, terabytes of information on that topic that they can pull in to speak to. So being as specific as possible, providing as much context as possible to ground that engine in the frame of mind and the scope that it should be considering is really important. These examples are fairly general, but we'll look at some more practical examples when we're actually working in the interfaces and how we can get very specific and make sure that those outputs that we get from our generative AI engine are as usable and targeted to our use case as possible. Relevance is also important. The idea, again, explaining why is a really important piece of information, and making sure that the context that we're building makes sense. And so some of these right-hand irrelevant examples, write a paragraph about why generative AI is useful for astronauts. That's maybe not as relevant as why it's useful for writers. Not to say that generative AI couldn't be useful for astronauts. Certainly it could, but probably more practical use cases around a writer. Summarizing this article in 3 words, that's a very tall order. 3 sentences, that makes a little bit more sense. So just being relative in those prompts and what you're asking of AI, and making sure that what you ask is realistic and is practical. Because when we get examples like this third one, find statistics about growth of AI in the rainforest, probably our generative AI large language models are not going to have a lot of grounding information or articles or data about growth of AI in the rainforest. So it's going to try to make its own correlations. This is a really good example of where you will probably get a hallucination, right? It's probably going to try to make something up to be relevant. So the less relevant your prompt is, the less relevant the output of the LLM will be. So making sure that it's as relative as possible. And this last one is just silly. Obviously, a sentence can't be more purple, but it's still going to try, right? The engine is still going to try to make that sentence more purple, even though technically you can't. It will try. So making sure that those requests are relevant and targeted to what you're looking for is going to be a key part of getting the most out of the outputs that the large language model generates. There are a couple of other things to consider when we're looking at specific output and text-based output. How we put the prompt in place and what we ask of the engine with the prompt regarding style, for example, will radically affect the output. So if we say write a paragraph that describes, well, this is going to be descriptive. It's going to provide factual information. It's going to lay it out as clearly as possible, and look probably fairly largely academic. Whereas if we ask the engine to convince the reader, or to argue the point of a specific opinion, or the argue the benefits of a specific, maybe one of our products. It's going to be more convincing. It's going to try to simulate a more convincing, and kind of debate related, human tone. The same thing for informative and narrative, right? So we can control the output by telling the model, telling the ChatGPT or Copilot what we expect of it. And that can be as simple as saying describe or convince, but that can be as complex as saying, okay, Copilot, you are a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Army, with experience in these, theaters of contact, and you've served in these different nations, and you can provide an immense and deep and broad context for the Copilot, and then ask it to answer a question. In your opinion, what are the top 5 considerations for, global military conduct, or something like that? And so it could be for something like that, but it could be, hey, you are a oil and gas pipeline engineer. You've worked in these countries on these projects. What are the top 3 concerns for pipeline safety? So we can build as much context into our prompts and really tell Copilot who it is, right? Or I should say, Copilot or ChatGPT, tell the engine who it is and what it should do. And then we can expect a much more clear result. And so that's in, in style, certainly. That's also in tone. And the idea that how, what that input looks like can be, we can change that based on just requesting tone. And the interesting thing about, we could say, write a paragraph in a formal tone about why generative AI is useful for writers, but we can actually use the tone of our prompt. So however we ask generative AI a question, it's going to attempt to respond in the same way. So if we ask in a very, more casual and humorous phrasing, it's going to attempt to respond in the same way. If we make it, friendly and kind of gregarious, then the engine is going to attempt to respond in the same way. So it's not just what we ask for, it's also how we ask for it that informs what the output looks like. So these are really critical understandings in getting the most out of generative AI, and really, in your real world scenarios, capturing the value of that. Let's look at this just briefly. I know I've showed this already in some of the demos of the products, but just in those 2 kind of paid full versions of ChatGPT and Copilot, what some of this might look like. So let's jump into, I'll start with ChatGPT first. And so again, this is ChatGPT, the paid version, and so I'm using ChatGPT 4 as the engine. You'll also notice I have some other GPTs alongside here. I want to point these out right now, because we won't come back to ChatGPT much after this section. But DALL-E is our image generator for ChatGPT, so I can ask it to create images just like I did with Copilot. And again, image creation, the sky is the limit. So I asked it for a landscape of North Saskatchewan. That's fine, but I may say, provide a landscape of, actually here, let's go like this. Provide a, show an image of a pipeline in a field in the style of, let's say, Claude Monet, right? So in a specific, very specific artistic style, it will generate that based on, again, what is a simple directive, right? In the style of Claude Monet is a 5-word or a 6-word phrase, but there is a ton of, meaning and grounding in that, right? It's going to attempt to, that's interesting. Okay, let's just try that again. Wonder what it didn't like. Okay, I'll let it generate there. So again, similar thing, right? Where we have a simple object and the context that we're giving us again is just a few words. I am violating the policy. Okay, I'm going to come back to this. Apologies about that. The interesting thing is this this did work well before. But we have different GPTs that are available in ChatGPT, and they do different things. So a data analyst allows you to take files, for example, an Excel file, and analyze and visualize your data. So it can create charts, it can provide statistical analysis. There's some pretty cool features there. There we go. So there's some really neat stuff there. So for example, I have an Excel spreadsheet here that I'm going to toss in and upload. This is a very simple, like I think 10 or 11 rows of sales information. And so it's taken that file in, knows what's in the file. So now I can say provide a profit summary. And I know what's in the file, right? I know it's sales data, so I can ask it from that file to provide a profit summary for me and put that in place. And so, there are some capabilities in ChatGPT that that extend beyond just simple text input and output. And here it's going to show me, it tells me about the file and what kind of information it has and what it's going to do to provide that that profit summary. And then it'll create what is likely going to be, it looks like point form. And so it just gives me some of those, those point informations. And I could say generate a chart for return on investment. And again, in the data set, and I'll show you the data set here really quick in Excel. And so this shows the ROI for each campaign, and it actually creates a little chart for us. So, we can copy this chart, paste it into a presentation or whatever the case might be, and have some of that capability in place. This is the data set just for your reference here. It's this little 12 rows of sales information. So there actually is no ROI column here. It's just showing revenue versus budget. And the engine is intelligent enough to know that there's a revenue column and know that there's a budget column, and that generally when we're calculating return on investment, we look at profit versus our cost. So it calculates that for me, and I don't have to specifically provide that formula or anything else. I just provide that real world query. And so some of those capabilities are available in ChatGPT. As you'll see, these capabilities are a little more fleshed out and kind of easier to access in Copilot, just because it's integrated with the Microsoft 365 apps. But there are some real, practical business capabilities that are built in. Some of the other GPTs that are available, there are these are both user developed GPTs. So, again, plugging the GPT capability and using an API to supplement that large language model and provide it with more specific context, or to incorporate it into other software and engines, right? So Canva has a chat GPT engine built into it. But some of the built-in, the chat GPT created native GPTs, there's some cool ones here. Again, a lot of these are more personal, with the, the plant care assistant and the coloring book hero and the game player. But there's also things like, tech support advisor, negotiator, the data analyst, as we looked at the creative writing coach. It's that engine tailored to a specific use case, and those can be created as well. It's more developer centered process, but that's part of that API integration and customization that we saw in the comparison chart. And then DALL-E as well, there are specific image generation capabilities in DALL-E. For most of these, we could get the same results just with a very detailed prompt telling it to generate a cartoon version and provide the specific inputs. But these GPTs that have been built essentially take care of providing the context and training the model a little bit to generate specific outputs. And so there's a long list. I won't go through them all, but writing and productivity and research analysis, there's quite a few custom capabilities in Copilot. And something as simple as coding, and this, we actually don't even need the the specific code Copilot. I could just do this in the core chat GPT, and I could say, write a section of Python code to iterate through an array of, what are we looking for? Functions, and aggregate the output of the functions based on, actually, that should be it. That'll provide me with something. Let's make aggregate look proper. So something, working with code, if you were a developer, and you have an idea of where to start, but some of the code in place, you're not sure where to get started. Here it is, right? So it's got a few different functions in place. It's created a list to hold those aggregated outputs, and then iterated through those functions and stored the output. Now the functions themselves are pretty basic and straightforward, but we could input other functions that we have in place, replace those, and we have the the capability to take this code and copy it and start using it in our in our Python code that we're working with. I can also do something like this: debug this code form, or debug a and I may have a chunk of code that I'm struggling with, and say, let's debug this code. And it says, okay, give me the code. I'll give it that same code that it output. So it probably won't find, too many problems with it, but sometimes it will, right? And this is a way to check the outputs of ChatGPT to make sure that that it's giving you the right answer. And this says, okay, here's what it is, and here's why it is. And we could also say, what does this code do, right? And it would provide it with a similar result that it's outputting. And saying you've got the functions list, we got the aggregated outputs list. So that ability to take code and generate and debug code is, again, a real strength of the learning and data retention capabilities of an LLM. So there's some cool capabilities there as well, for sure. I think for for kind of use cases for ChatGPT, it's this, going to be the same for the chat interface of Copilot as well. The sky really is the limit here. Sometimes one of the toughest things to wrestle with is that idea of what prompt do I use, in any given interface, whether it's Copilot, whether it's ChatGPT, what prompt should I use to get what I want. I want to provide you with a really cool little piece of Chat GPT or Copilot usage here. And let's see. Yeah, we can here. You know what? Let's reset this and start a new conversation. And then I'll paste my text in and we'll take a look at it. So here's a very long prompt, and I'll take my quotes out of here. And this is building context, right? So this is telling Copilot, or this is telling ChatGPT what I want it to do. I want you to, and I actually had built this for Copilot, but so we'll say ChatGPT. So telling ChatGPT I want it to be a prompt engineer. So I want it to help me create a prompt, help me to create a good question that I can ask a large language model to get the result that I want. And so I say, here's the process. And again, this is pretty complex, right? So I'm saying we have steps. Step one, ask me what it's about. I'll provide the answer, but we're going to need to improve it and continuing through these next steps. So step two, based on my input, generate both a revised prompt as well as a set of relevant questions that might help improve the prompt. And then the third step, we're going to continue this until I tell you we're done. And so with this prompt, and this is a prompt that you can really just paste in here, and this can help you build a good generative AI prompt about any topic. So I might say here, let's say, I'm starting very general. What should the prompt be about? Transportation regulations. And so, okay, let's start. Here's the initial prompt that it's suggesting. Discuss current transportation regulations. It's making some assumptions that we want to talk about both sectors. Any changes or updates, highlight the impact. So it's created a pretty decent prompt for me already. But then it's asked questions. It says, do you want information about a specific country and region? Do you want to focus on specific modes? Any specific regulations? So I might say focus on Canadian regulations for public transit buses. What else did it ask me regarding emissions? And so again, I'm just answering the questions that it asks me and refining that prompt. And it said, okay, here's the prompt that you should use. And it kind of adds those details into the prompt for me. And I might say, okay, that's good. That's exactly what I wanted for a prompt. Or I can keep going. I can keep answering the questions and refining it. And then I might say, I'm done. And I told it, in the very initial prompt, can keep on going until I say that I'm done. and it says, okay, here is our final revised prompt. And it's actually giving me two different outputs here just to give me a choice. And response one is great. Here's the prompt. So great, I can take that prompt, plug it in, and get the output that I want from the model. So again, using GPT, using Copilot in novel ways and thinking outside of the box is where you're going to get the biggest benefits from this. And that's generating a pretty decent prompt. And I might have had an idea about this prompt, but some of those questions that it asked earlier, I may not have thought about the fact that, I should think about emissions, or I want to centralize it to public transit. So, this simple prompt here, and I'll just pause here so you can, kind of get a screen capture on it. This is building a prompt engineer for you. This is having your generative AI engine build its own prompt that you're going to use to get information from the generative AI engine. Okay, let's shift focus here and talk a little bit about, we did the hands-on exploration. Let's talk a little bit about Copilot, because we've looked very much at the chat interface of these two tools, and that idea of, kind of our iterative chat conversation and how that can give us information. Copilot in Microsoft 365 extends a lot of that capability and really provides some very interesting integration with a broad set of Microsoft 365 apps that make it instantly usable and instantly integratable into your Microsoft 365 environment. And there are a number of different ways in which we can use Copilot in the different Microsoft 365 apps. So in the browser, like we've seen so far, right, that idea of answering questions and creating content. One of the things that we've seen so far in ChatGPT and Copilot is we've used internet data, right, publicly available data. With Copilot in Microsoft 365, we can also start examining internal data and looking at data that we have within our own enterprise Microsoft 365 tenant and using that to inform our answers. In Teams, we can use it to summarize summarize and review meetings and chats. There's some really cool capability in there. Outlook, again, summarize communications and calendar information. We can use it to draft new messages. In PowerPoint, creating new presentations from scratch, adding slides, making some small changes in PowerPoint. In Excel, generating charts, formulas, insights about our data. In Word, creating documents from scratch, but also refining documents and creating documents from existing sources as well. And so each of these applications has an element of Copilot functionality built into it, as well from the main chat interface. In Copilot from Microsoft 365, we have access to all of that information, right? So we can ask questions about meetings. We can ask questions about emails and calendar invites. We can browse through or reference PowerPoint presentations for a basis of information that we're creating. We can use an Excel spreadsheet as a source data, and same thing with Word documents. So not only is there integration in the apps, but we can also use data from the apps to create our generative AI or produce our generative AI outputs. And there's a huge benefit here. And it's really about making your data smarter. And so all of those different files, and we didn't have SharePoint or OneDrive on our list, but those are really kind of the two main sources of enterprise data in Copilot for Microsoft 365, as well as, Teams and OneNote notebooks and PowerPoints and Words, Word documents. All of those feed into, that Copilot large language model. So now not only are we taking information from, generally publicly available data, but we're also pulling in our enterprise data, and those files that are in OneDrive, Teams, and SharePoint, and Outlook meetings, and Teams meetings, and all of those different pieces that we use on a day-to-day basis. And then we can also pull from this is the Microsoft Graph logo right here, from the graph in general, which includes, organizational information, who my manager is and who are my direct reports, my office location, all of those information, or those pieces of information we can pull from the graph. Now, really important thing as far as, data access and data privacy is, if it's me, Jason, using Copilot to access all of this corporate information, the permissions and the access that I have are going to be specifically based on my account and the permissions that my account has. So, this your information in Copilot is as secure as it is in Microsoft 365. So with things like sensitivity labels and permissions and all of those different things, that governs what I have access to through Copilot. So it's not that, Copilot suddenly has this, mysterious backdoor access to all of my data. That's not the case. It's the same, has the same access as I would as a user going in. It's just that it can look at it all at once and summarize it and read it and consume it far faster than I ever could individually. Let's talk a little bit about the specific application capabilities. Oops. So in Microsoft Edge, this is kind of the core, central point where we access the Copilot chat interface like we've seen before. And so we can ask questions about both internet and internal data, gather information about, employees, projects, all of those different things. There's some really cool use cases there. In Microsoft Teams, we have the ability to summarize meetings, create recaps and action items from meetings and chats in Teams. And this is a huge benefit to those of you that are, inundated with Teams meetings and expected to be in 5 to 6 meetings a day. If you miss those meetings or can't make meetings, or you've got, you're double booked, with Teams, you can actually get a recap and a summary and even ask specific questions about the meeting regarding, your involvement. Wasn't my name mentioned in this meeting? How does this affect me? What are my action items out of this meeting? So there's a lot of really cool capabilities built into Teams that allow you to make use of Copilot and generative AI capability in Teams. Outlook, drafting messages, right? So creating emails, using a prompt, say, hey, write an email to Lisa about the latest sales numbers, and it'll generate that for you and allow you to refine it. So you spend less time, at that, staring at that blank page, and more time actually creating and refining what those results are. We can also translate messages, from a language perspective. We can summarize email threads. And also ask for feedback on, on an email that you've created. How can I make this more friendly? Or does this email need to be more formal? Those types of questions we can ask right in Outlook. In PowerPoint, the ability to create new presentations from a prompt, from scratch, using that existing content and from within our organization, and building out a PowerPoint slide. We're going to look at these individually, practically, and kind of a combination use case here in just a little bit. So you'll see some of this as well, but some really cool capabilities in PowerPoint to start that slide creation process and really use existing documents to build slide content. And then again, ask for suggestions on organizing, summarizing, or improving that presentation. Excel, some really neat data analysis and kind of feature creation capabilities, the ability to ask about data in natural language, the ability to create charts using natural language queries, highlighting, sorting filter, generating columns. Those are all available in Excel. It's some really neat functionality in there. And then the last one on the list here is Word, and we're covering the core Microsoft 365 applications here, but everything that you would assume that you could do in Word from a generative AI perspective, whatever, create your Star Trek script if you want, or build a document that talks about your new marketing plans and your customer loyalty programs. We can do that right within the context of Word, build that information in Word, refine it, rephrase it, all of those different things. So there's a lot of really cool capability built into the Copilot interface. And within all of those applications are built-in prompt guides. So, if you're sitting there staring at an application, not sure what you need for a prompt, there are built-in guides that can kind of take you through what you want to do. And, again, kind of help you create your prompt and help you ask the question that you want to ask just by asking you more questions about it. So there's some really helpful tools in there. Let's take a look at this just kind of from a practical use case perspective. And this is an important feature of the Microsoft 365 Copilot suite, is this ability to really start building on your results and creating new pieces of content. So I'm actually just going to flip over here to PowerPoint. And actually, you know what? Let's start with Excel. I'll start with Excel because there's some cool use cases here. So in Excel, I am going to open up a spreadsheet here. I'll use this Copilot or this AI test file. So this is a spreadsheet that just shows that same sales information from before. In Excel, I have the Copilot button in the ribbon, and I can click that button and open up the Copilot pane. In theory, if it opens it up for me, it's thinking about it. Oh, not signed in. Okay, well, let's sign in really quick. And in Excel here, again, those prompt things, those different things that I might want to do, it'll guide me through, or I can provide a prompt. And I might say something as simple as add a column for ROI. Simple ask, 5 words. And from an Excel formula perspective, it's going to say, okay, here's the formula I think generates ROI. Here's the column that I will create. Let me know if this works. And so I have that, here's the ROI formula, right? Revenue minus budget over budget, which is going to calculate the percentage of ROI. Perfect. I'll insert that column, and you can see when I mouse over insert, it inserts that column for me, creates the ROI label like I gave it, provides the values, even puts it in percentage form for me. Really simple, easy calculation there. I can also use Copilot to generate charts. So I might say create a chart that shows ROI or let's say ROI by campaign type. So I have this campaign type column here, the different campaigns that I have, and I'm saying, okay, I want to see general ROI calculated, divided up or represented by these individual campaign types. And I can, I'm asking it to generate a chart. So what it'll probably do here is give me, I would guess, a bar chart or a column chart. We'll see. It'll put it in the pane for me here and tell me what it's doing and how it's doing it. And so here it is. Makes sense, right? So we've got kind of a horizontal bar chart, tells me what it is, here's the results that I get. And then I can take this chart and add it. It's adding it to a new sheet for me, putting that chart in place and creating a little table for me of the results of that chart. So some really, quick and easy ways. And of course, I can go in and format that chart after and decide exactly what it's going to look like and how it's going to represent the data. So there's lots of different capabilities to change it and customize it after. But to give you that starting point, to give you that kickoff is a really great piece of functionality. And so now I have, those two sheets and some more information and detail in my Excel document, and that's great. That might be great for what I'm looking for. However, I might say, okay, I want to summarize this. So let's jump over to, sorry, I'm going to open up Word here. Let's jump over to Word and let's use that Excel document. And let's do a little bit of creation here. So I'll create a new document, and you will see this little Copilot logo shows up, and I can select that, and it gives me the option to draft with Copilot. And so I might say create a summary. And what am I creating a summary of? Well, you know what? I want to use that Excel file. So the cool thing about Copilot and Microsoft 365 is I can directly reference that Excel file. I've used the / character here, and it lets me browse for, I can just type the name of a file. And so I'll type the AI, I think it was called AI list, or AI, what was it called? AI test, actually. Doesn't find it, so that's okay. I'll just go and browse my files from the cloud and find it. And I know that it's in my files and it's in this folder right here. Oh, shoot. I've actually, that is not what I want. Okay, so here is an example of a shortcoming that I should point out, and this is actually practically useful for us to look at. The files that I can reference in Copilot vary from application to application. So you'll notice that my AI test here is grayed out, so I can't use an Excel spreadsheet in the Word drafting format. However, I'm not stuck because I can actually go to the Copilot interface. And this is an important thing to note here, is that this web Copilot interface, when we have it switched to the work version, has broad access to pretty much everything. So from here, I can actually get to that Excel, generate, let's go create a summary of, and I'll point you to that file. And you notice that I can reference AI test from the web browser-based version. And that's fairly universal in the Microsoft 365 suite is, and I'll create a document that describes a summary of AI test. Okay, so now I can generate that text based on that Excel spreadsheet, and it's going to output that information, create the summary for me. And so, talks about campaign owners, talks about campaign types, talks about some different figures and important figures that are in place. And I might say add more financial detail, right? So I can refine this. And then again, it'll provide that output for me. Oh, didn't like it. didn't want to provide me with more financial detail. I have to go back and refine that. But for simplicity's sake, let's say this is good for us. I could copy that text in here, go back into my Word document, paste that in, and go from there, right? And continue in there. And it just says, hey, this is the file that it's referring to. Maybe I don't need that necessarily in my document. Maybe I do. I can leave it in there if I want. So I have this document, and then I can save this, and we'll call it campaign results summary. I'll save it in there. And now I have that Word document that has that summary for me, which is super useful. I could also jump into PowerPoint and say, okay, I need to create a slide deck for this particular campaign and summarizing the campaign. I can come into PowerPoint. I can open up the Copilot window in PowerPoint, and it's going to tell me to wait because it's, loading the presentation. There we go. And then in PowerPoint, I can say, okay, let's create a presentation based on, and I can reference a document directly. And I will reference, it's still calling it document 5. It hasn't picked up my rename yet, but that's okay. And create a presentation based on that document. And so it's looking at that Word document that I created based on the Excel document, and it's going to generate a set of slides for me. Oh yeah, no, it's complaining about the rename. Let's try that again. And I will note one thing here with this is Copilot can sometimes be a little slow catching up on where those files are at. What I found most useful is to open up OneDrive, to go find that file, open it up. Maybe make a change in here. I'll delete a quotation and then exit the file. We'll exit it here as well. Let's go back into okay. It's not finding my file right now. It will eventually find that campaign file. But for now, let's use I'll just use another file that is in place here. I'll use this 2023 Manufacturing Global Economic Report, and we'll create a presentation based on that file. Now, not a direct line from my Excel spreadsheet like I hoped for, but I do want to show the results of grabbing a Word document. And that Word document, while it's generating here, we can go take a look at that. I'll find it in the list. And this is a document that I actually created using Copilot to look at the global economic trends in 2023. So you can see there's a bunch of content here and talking about the different verticals and the different domains of global economics. Pretty dry stuff unless you're an economist, but what we'll see in PowerPoint here is it's going to generate this presentation, gives us kind of an outline of what's in place, and draft that presentation up for us, still creating the outline for us. This is probably the slowest of all the interfaces with PowerPoint in generating the slides and content. Well, what we get once this hits 100% is a starting point for slide creation, and there's a couple cool things here that I'll show once this is created, as far as kind of refining and making this better or more relevant or the way that we want it to look. So here's our deck, here's our title page, here's our agenda page, and then the individual slides are here. Executive summary, intro, here's our output and growth, and you'll notice that it's created charts based on the charts that are in the document, pulled out some of those numbers. It's included images that are relevant, or usually these images are pretty relevant to to the design. So it's put together, this slide presentation based on that document, and it may not be perfect. It may not be exactly what I'm going to use going forward, but it's a great start and an excellent starting point to jump into a presentation. And from a time-saving perspective, and as an executive, for example, trying to create this presentation, this has probably saved me hours, really, because the data is there. It's just a matter of transposing it from Word into PowerPoint. In this case, Copilot does the work for us, puts it in place. So we'd want to check images. We want to make sure they're all relevant. We'd want to, double check the data and make sure that that corresponds to the information in the Word document. But the bulk of the work is done for us here. And if we decide, from a design perspective, that that's not exactly how we like it or how we'd want it, there's a whole bunch of options in the designer to refine the look and feel and really build that whole deck into something exactly or something that fits our idea or our design precisely. So there's some great capabilities, and you can see how very quickly the AI capabilities in those Microsoft applications can daisy chain and really build into some really cool functionality. Okay, we're close to wrapping up here, folks. Just a very brief discussion about data privacy and safety. And the main thing here to talk about, and I don't even have a separate slide here, I just wanted to talk about data privacy and safety in general within the scope of large language models. The two biggest concerns with data privacy and safety in generative AI are, number one, how does the engine use my inputs? Right? Is it saving the information or using my information for any nefarious purposes? Or, and with GPT and Copilot, the answer is generally no, it's not. But it's important to understand that for both of these models, the way that it uses our inputs obviously influences the model and helps the model to learn. So the inputs that we place into the models become part of what the model uses to generate our answers. The other question is, and this is more specifically related to Copilot, is how is my enterprise data used? And this is probably the most important question and the most often asked question about Copilot. And the simple answer here from a Microsoft safety and data privacy standpoint is your enterprise data stays in your enterprise always. That's part of Microsoft's responsible AI initiative, and you can read up more on that responsible AI initiative. Whoops, sorry about that. you can read up on that responsible AI initiative more on the Microsoft website, and it talks about how they're using AI in their products as an organization, kind of all up. So that's available from the following URL. I'm just going to toss it right onto the slide here. Get rid of the localized stuff and do a little bit of slide cleanup. And then there is more information, that we can include in this masterclass and include in our time here. But this is an excellent resource to take a look at what it looks like, especially on the Copilot side, from a responsible AI perspective and what those practices are. There's a reference guide there. There's lots of really great information on the Microsoft Responsible AI site. So take a look at that. And there's the playbook. There's the reference guide. Lots of really great information about how Microsoft uses data and how it protects data within its AI tenancy on those Microsoft 365 tenants. ChatGPT does not specifically have a published data use policy or standard, just for reference, but that's less critical because ChatGPT is really just using the data from publicly available sources to inform its models, not necessarily using any data from you other than your own inputs. And this masterclass has been, we've a lot of content, a lot of things to think about, but it's really, it's probably going to be the beginning for many of you in your journey about learning more about generative AI and how you can use it in your environment, how generative AI is going to affect your organization, and it's just starting to build those skills that 82% of leaders said are super critical for their employees moving forward. Netcom is here to help you with that. Then the next step after our webinar here, after our masterclass, is what else do you want to learn? And so continue that learning, and especially in that realm of the Microsoft world, with Copilot, with generative AI, with Microsoft 365, with Microsoft's cloud technologies. There's a huge breadth of topics that you can jump into to just get yourself more prepared for improving your career path, jumping into that next section of success with your career with Netcom training. And getting certified is such a big piece of that. And Microsoft certifications hold big weight in the industry as far as proving out your expertise, demonstrating to your own employers or prospective employers that you have the skill sets required. And then Microsoft certification program allows you to build that skill set, to provide proof of that skill set, and to continue your learning and your education journey within that scope of a Microsoft product. So it allows you to stand out, get greater recognition because of those skills that you've built and validated. Those certifications, and being a certified technologist is just naturally leads to better jobs and more money and higher demand. And it's an increase in your employability, and in the way that you can show how you can provide value to your employer or prospective employers. And Microsoft has an entire kind of social network built around certification paths where you can show your badges, you can put those skills into your profiles and your resume, and start to really advertise and put yourself out there as having all of these Microsoft skills in place. And it's that learning is now a prerequisite of employment in technology and in general business. Technology changes daily, and when that culture of learning, that culture of certification and continuous learning is embraced by an organization, it just it automatically translates to more success. The stat on the slide says well-trained and certified teams are almost 24 or 20% more productive than other staff. So that idea of a growth mindset and continuous learning mindset is critical, and certification is the way to build that. And so the event handout includes a download link for this book, A Win-Win of Certification, and how employees and businesses can thrive through continuous learning. If you are interested in jumping in and continuing your learning journey, role-based instructor-led classroom training is an amazing place to start. Netcom has a broad section of fantastic classes and certification paths that you can follow, led by industry expert trainers that know what they're talking about, that have real life grounded experience, and provide you with real world use cases and insights into your organization and how you can use the different products and technologies that are in place. And as the slide says, the 180-day access to virtual labs, 90-day access to recordings of courses, full access to personalized learning portal, opportunities for free repeats, and the amazing 24/7 priority support that the Netcom staff provides. And certification, just like learning, is an ongoing process. And so when you take that course, you write that exam, you gain that certification, that's an ongoing and an evergreen process. And Microsoft technology changes. All of these technologies change over time. So the need to keep that certification current and valid and relevant is part of Microsoft's value, part of the value, I should say, of Microsoft's certification process, because the fact that Microsoft requires their certified pros to renew their certifications keeps that certification valid. It keeps it as an industry recognized, celebrated and sought after credential for years after you earn it. And the certification renewal process is fantastic. It's definitely not as intense as writing the initial exam, but it is a way just to continue representing your expertise in the specific areas that you've gained certification in, not just for the next year or two, but for all of the time in the future that you want to maintain expertise in that particular domain of certification. So let's do it. Contact your Netcom rep. Let's get trained and certified, and let Netcom take you on the next step of your learning journey. And we will wrap up our session with one last slide and one last set of questions, hopefully, and some of the questions from the group. And yeah, let me know what you have for questions about our topic, maybe related exactly to what I said, or maybe something completely different. Toss them out.
Thank you, Jason. That was most informative.
I know everyone is looking forward to the Q&A session, so go ahead and start putting your questions into the questions panel.
Our first question is, how often are ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot updated?
Ooh, excellent question. Okay, so they operate on different cadences, but from a content perspective and from a feature perspective, generally monthly is the typical cadence for both of these tools. So you'll see, ChatGPT and its use of the surrounding data that it's trained on is generally kind of a year, its data is about a year behind of the current date. And that typically updates on a month-by-month basis. So that training data for ChatGPT is about a month or updated each month. And then the Copilot features, obviously Copilot uses the GPT engine, so that update goes for Copilot as well. But then Copilot features, again, generally run on a monthly cadence. And I'd say from the release of Copilot a little like late last year to now, that monthly cadence of updates is about accurate for Microsoft Copilot functionality. And that's a continued evolution of features and capability that Microsoft is building into Copilot. Great question.
Second question of the day is, are there different versions of Copilot?
Yes, so we talked about this a little bit, but probably not all of the way in the slides. So there is the free version of Copilot that you can get by going to copilot.microsoft.com and signing in with a Microsoft account. And I'll maybe just throw this on the slide here really quick. So there's the free version. And then there is Copilot for Microsoft 365. Okay, and so this one is $30 per month. And you also need a supported Microsoft 365 subscription. So the Microsoft 365 subscription that you pay kind of on a per user basis for, that would be, you'd have that, and that could be anywhere from like personal basic all the way to like enterprise E5. You'd have that license, and then you would add on Copilot to that license with this $30 a month price. There is also a Copilot Pro, which we didn't talk much about in the slides. This is independent of Microsoft 365, so you don't need the Microsoft 365 licensing, but it gives you some of the extra capability in Copilot that you see on in Copilot for Microsoft 365. So image creation, having the Copilot interface in your apps, it's fairly similar here as far as a feature set, but it's not something that you tack on to a Microsoft 365 license. It's its own piece. This is, whoops, let's go back. This one right now is, I think, $27 US per month. It's not as, let's say approximately equal, right? Because there's a lot of the enterprise data access that you get with Copilot for Microsoft 365 that doesn't come across the Copilot Pro, but it's basically kind of a single user version of Copilot for Microsoft 365 that you can attach to a personal Microsoft account. The Copilot for Microsoft 365, that needs to be attached to what is essentially kind of a business or a work or school account.
Next question in the queue is, will these tools generate false information?
So yes, and we talked about hallucination a little bit, and they can. The possibility is there, again, because there's a certain creative element to both ChatGPT and Copilot, and the underlying engines that support them. The opportunity or the possibility for hallucination or false information is always there. Now, that's going to be more present when we're generating, creative information, narrative text, those types of things. But as we saw in the slides, we can always use Copilot or ChatGPT to check its own work, right? Take that output, feed it back in, say, is this correct? And have it fact check for you. So there's some great tools there to make sure that the information that it's providing is valid. And again, with any generative AI, we want to avoid just copying and pasting the results, right? It's not a pilot. It's a co-pilot. It's helping you along the way. It's not there to just allow you to do absolutely nothing.
And finally, our last question of the day is, have you encountered any novel use cases for ChatGPT or Copilot?
I think I've some of the ones that I demonstrated are, kind of some of the really cool use cases. The use of Copilot or ChatGPT for coding is really, really great. And that idea of, the fact that Copilot and ChatGPT can create any kind of output and then format it in any way you want is really cool. So, one of the cool things that I've done lately is I wanted to gather a whole bunch of information, and I can't be specific just because of NDA stuff, but I needed to gather information about a whole bunch of different locations and businesses globally. And this is all publicly information on the internet. So I asked Copilot to go find this information. And then I also asked it, when it returned the information, to format it in JSON. Okay, so in JavaScript object notation format. And it returned it perfectly. So it gave me all of this information, and not just a chunk of text or bullet lists or a table, but actually coded into an unstructured data format that I could just plug right into a file and start using instantly as a data source. So I would say, playing with the formatting, the output formatting is a big piece of that. So you can ask it to output as a table, certainly, and as code. That's probably one of the most applicable and interesting ways that I've used it recently. I think the idea of having the large language model do its own work is I think probably one of the best cases, right? Whether that's debugging code, whether that's fact checking output, whether that's helping you build a prompt, whether that's telling you the best ways to use a large language model, kind of that recursive or that, folding ChatGPT or Copilot back on itself is where, there's some really huge value in there, and you can provide some pretty cool results. Great questions.
Once again, I want to remind you that as you leave the session today, you will be presented with a short survey. We would like to request for you to help us by taking a quick moment to participate in that survey. Your feedback really helps us understand your learning experience as we are constantly looking at how we can improve our future sessions. The survey answers are measured on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 representing outstanding and 1 representing poor. We want to thank all of you for joining us today, and if you do come up with any additional questions, feel free to send them to webinar@netcomlearning.com at any time. We hope that you found today's webinar informative, and we look forward to seeing you back here with us soon. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about our webinars and other courses. Have a great day, everyone.